So I decided to record a little demo and maybe do a few devlogs for this project that I'm working on. The basic idea behind the project is an ASCII, for now, Kenshi-like. So I'm basically tapping into a kind of traditional roguelike influence, maybe something like Dwarf Fortress even, but the main difference is that I decided not to make it turn-based. It's going to be in real time, and it's going to have controls very similar to Kenshi, and in general, it's going to attempt this kind of RTS style controls, I guess you would say. Yeah, so the world is tile-based, but the movement is in basically float space, right? So that's kind of continuous, more or less. Yeah, so what else? So yeah, everything is processed in real time. And the main reason for that is actually I felt that turn-based system kind of makes things more complicated than simpler, I found. Because, I don't know, like everything so far in what I'm doing seems so much more natural than when I was doing it in turn-based style. It's like, I feel like it's because maybe turns are a very low resolution kind of time unit, and they kind of matter a lot. Whereas frames in a game that kind of adapt to real time are a lot smaller, so I don't know, they kind of matter less, I guess. Not really, but like the resolution is a lot higher. So like the updates to the world that you do are at a much smaller scale each time, right? And that sort of makes it easier to like build up logic on top of each other. I don't know if that's making any sense. But basically, yeah, I realized that real time is sort of simpler, at least so far. Maybe I will encounter some stuff later that won't make it simple, but so far I'm actually enjoying this. But of course, on the other side, I feel like for the player, a real-time game is always like more intuitive. In a traditional roguelike, you always kind of have to look at things analytically, rationally. You have to like read the log, see, okay, this is happening here and stuff like that, if you want to understand what's happening. Or you just like mash buttons and whatever, right? But usually in a real-time game, the actual passage of time and what's happening in time is more intuitive, right? Like it's just happening and you're observing it. You don't have to read anything, you don't have to understand anything. So I feel like that makes it a lot more understandable, right? But all the ASCII stuff, tile-based world, allows me for a very like simplified kind of I guess paradigm in which I can create a dynamic world, if that makes sense, right? So I don't have to worry about assets. I don't have to worry about pretty much anything but the literary side and, you know, what the symbol is and the color and stuff like that. So that's what's cool to me. Plus world gen, right? Tile-based world gen. You know, you can do more than if it was actual mesh-based and stuff, or even, you know, in 2D. I guess, I don't know. I guess in 2D it's kind of going to be tile-based anyways. So yeah, that's kind of how it is now. Okay, so what else should I mention? So for now, what I have going on is just a simple world. I don't have pretty much anything. I'm just showing some tiles, then I'm showing some entities on top of it, and I just implemented some basic UI for debugging and stuff like that. I'm using just SDL and OpenGL, and I'm using this kind of quote-unquote library that I wrote just for myself, not really as a separate project or anything, but as part of the projects that I do. And this is like the second iteration that I use this in. I mean, it's not perfect, or it's not even good, maybe, but it's heavily inspired by Raylib. It's just that when I use libraries, there's usually two paths for me. Either I hate my life and I hate this library and I just want to do everything myself from scratch, or I love this library and I'm just inspired by the API and everything to make my own that is similar. So I think it's pretty obvious here that in this case, I was very inspired by Raylib and decided to make my own. Plus, I encountered a few things that I didn't like so much about Raylib, and I also encountered a couple of missing features. So in the end, that pushed me even further to make this decision. But I mean, it's also like good for learning, and it's good because it's pretty much tailored to how I do this. So yeah. And of course, at the base of it all is just SDL and OpenGL. And like Win32 sometimes. I do want to make it cross-platform. So it's very minimal in what it uses in Win32, but there are some things, and I'll just have to implement that for Linux later. Also, I'm just looking at OBS, and I don't know what the hell is happening here. Hold on. I don't know why it's not showing the whole screen. I think I messed something up before. Let me see, reset transform? Yes. So yeah. So to actually, okay, do the actual demo now. Enough of the preamble. It's been almost 8 minutes. So basically, it has an RTS style movement. So you kind of click with the mouse where you want to go. It's real time, blah, blah, blah. I guess I show this first. So let's see. So I have basically a debug in Visual Studio, use Emacs for writing. This is what we got so far. So you can move around with the mouse. There's zoom out, zoom in. This is the character. So basically, you move around in real world. You kind of set a goal for yourself and you move there. And I also implemented that little turn around thing. Like, this is not really a line of sight cone. It's more just showing the direction, but it will be something like a line of sight cone later. And then this guy, we were just showing his kind of sight radius. And basically, he has a little bit of AI where he's gonna try to follow you as soon as you're in this radius. And when he comes in radius to attack, in the attack reach radius, he initiates combat. And as you can see, combat right now is this very simple state machine that basically goes through like phases of an attack and phases of defense. So basically, I can demo it in a second, but right now they're not really hitting each other, and they're constantly switching places. So one guy hits, the other deflects the hit, then they switch. The other guy hits, the other guy deflects the hit, right? So that's kind of the loop right now. And it's just showing this tile map, basically. There's no collisions, there's nothing like that, no pathfinding. It's just all in float space, resetting position, and WorldGen is in kind of, I guess, integers, like, tile-based, yeah. So yeah, to go back here, this is what I have. This is what I have. I guess, should I go like over the architecture so far in general? So I just have this game state. In here I have level and I have entity store. My level is basically something like this. It just does procedural generation, which just does that like singular room, right? And it also draws it using this kind of helper stuff. It's, yeah, like this is basically what my library looks like. This is kind of subbing vertices, or, you know, not the library itself, but this is what the usage code of the library looks like. It's not very good. I'd rather, I realized, not have to do this all here, but rather have kind of some memory and RAM inside the library that, or inside like this vertex batch. So it has a concept of a vertex batch where we will sub our data. It's prepared already in a separate call. I'm not going to go into that right now. And we just kind of sub our data that we define here. So I kind of want to do a similar thing to this RLGL, it's called, or like, you know, all GL kind of immediate mode type of deal where you just pass vertices. I kind of want to do something similar, right? Where I have data for vertex batch in RAM. I just do like pass vertex attribute, defining what's the type of the attribute, and passing the actual like data pointer, and then calling draw vertex batch, which will sub the data from RAM to GPU RAM and do the actual draw call. So yeah, this is drawing the tile map. Then I'm drawing NCs on top of that. Right, this is kind of how that works, very similarly, right? And this is not linked to the tile map at all, pretty much. It's just working in, basically like my world space is in floats, and then that gets transitioned into, yeah, and like 0 to 1 is basically one tile, right? 0 to 100% of one tile. And then, like when we render, obviously we transition that into pixels, and so on and so forth. And the idea is that I'll have levels that are 100 by 100, and then the world consists of those levels of 100 by 100. And the world is actually discrete. So it's just those discrete chunks, and for now, like, it will be basically not loaded kind of continuously, right? That's the idea, to basically simplify as much as I can all the world gen stuff, all of that. Like, I want to kind of go breadth first and depth after. So maybe later on it could become continuous, but obviously that complicates even just on the level of world gen, right? Like now you can't just say, oh, this chunk is a city, this chunk is a village or a river or something like that. Now you have to actually kind of continuously connect those maps in world gen. So I want to avoid that complexity for now. Okay, so I'm rambling very hard. I think I should just go into what I'm working on now, which is the combat. And as I've shown, I have this basic state machine so far. Let's see, process combat state. This is the state machine. So, excuse me. So, in the state machine, we have, I don't know if I should go through all the states kind of. a lot to say. My throat is already sore. But okay, so basically there's combat state ready. That's the initial state. And when you're in this state, if you see that your opponent is also in that state, you check if your initiative is greater, and if it is, then you initiate the attack, right? If I look at my states here, I basically have attack pre and post and defense pre, ready, and post, right? And if you see that your opponent is finishing his attack, or like, basically the idea is attack pre is, the start of the swing. Then at the end of attack pre, you're going to do the actual attack. And if the opponent is in defense ready, he will deflect that attack. If not, then he will get hit. And then after that attack happened, you go through attack post period, which is like finishing your swing, right? And then with defense, it's kind of similar. You have to prepare your defense, kind of get into the position. Then you go into ready, and now you will deflect any attack that comes your way. And then if you're done defending, you do defense post first, right? And this is what's going to happen here, is that if I see my opponent is post attack, I will start my own attack. And if I see my opponent preparing his attack, I will start a defense, right? So it's like I see him in the beginning of a swing, okay, let's defend. If I see him in the end of the swing, there will be logic here, like in terms of speed of combat and, some RNG and stuff, right? So that's what's going to determine whether I'm going to even go for this kind of, I guess, counterattack in this case. And I'm also thinking there are other things, like I could look to interrupt an attack. I could do like maybe an explicit counterattack after a defense, right? There's a lot of stuff that could be done there. But for now, it's just simple. And then, yeah, like this here, this float is basically seconds for how long this state should last, right? So I say, okay, let's go into attack pre for 1 second, right? And defense. So I say attack pre and post are 1 second long. Defense pre and post are 0.5 seconds long. And that's what allows for that kind of repetitive cycle right now. And then here we got attack pre. This is what it looks like. We're advancing the timer, which just adds the delta of the frame to the combat timer. And when the timer runs out, we say, okay, let's perform attack hit, which for now just checks if the opponent is defending in defense ready state, and if not, or sorry, if yes, then attack succeeds. If not, then it fails. Or I guess other way around. Whatever, you get the point. So, okay. We do this kind of attack instantaneously in this frame, and then we go into attack post state for 1 second. Here we just advance timer, and when we're done, we go back into combat state ready, right? And so in defense, first is just a timer to get your to get your defense ready. And then when we are in defense ready mode, or sorry, state, for now I just check. I will stay in this state as long as the opponent is not post attack. And this will obviously change later, because what I want to do is like see if like you can kind of tell, right? If you imagine yourself in that scenario, you can kind of tell how quickly the opponent is doing his attack. So if you see that he's in a post swing over like a heavy long attack, and that's maybe his style, you see stuff like that, and you're a quick fighter, you can maybe like decide here that, okay, I'm going to actually switch out of defense into attack mode. So I have to go through defense post and then start another attack. And I'll be quicker, so like I'll kind of get in the middle of his. And then There will be RNG involved as well, and stuff like that. It's kind of already getting complicated. So we'll see if it becomes unmanageable as a state machine. I'll also have stamina, and I think the way it'll work is that it's supposed to be super kind of short-term stamina, not really long-term. Maybe there could be something for that. This is just going to determine kind of like a flurry of attacks, like, you know, like you can attack, right? But at some point you have to stop. And I think that that can be done with this kind of short-term stamina. You will regain it very quickly as soon as you stop this continuous chain of attacks, right? And then defense will also take some from stamina, but less, right? That's kind of the idea. And that's going to put people into this cycle of combat where they're actually meaningfully fighting each other. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And then, as you can see, we go into defense post, we go through the timer, we go back into state ready, and then in ready state, we're again seeing like, okay, if the other guy is also in ready state, then we check initiative. If we see that he's beginning his attack already, we start defending, and it kind of goes back into this loop. And yeah, the last thing I did is this UI. I brought back my text rendering, a very shitty implementation of text rendering. And I started doing this little like widget-esque stuff. Basically here, right? So for all entities in combat, we'll just display this shit. Yeah, and I think I want to start actually varying these times, adding some kind of stats, and adding some RNG into this to make it actually meaningful, and to have like attacks that succeed and attacks that fail, and stuff like that. And that's my plan for later. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. I know it's very kind of hectic, and I'm basically rambling a lot, but hopefully the more of these devlogs I do, the better I'll get at them. So yeah, this is it.